Invisible to the power players of Titan Tech, Maid Eva Coleman polished boardroom tables and emptied executive trash bins, her legal expertise buried beneath a gray uniform and quiet demeanor. But when her trained eyes caught the hidden clause, in the $100 million Halvix merger contract, a clause that would silently strip Titan Tech of its most valuable assets, Eva faced an impossible choice. The CEO, who barely acknowledged her existence, was hours away from signing the company's death warrant, never suspecting that the woman they'd reduced to background furniture was about to whisper 5 words that would expose their blindness and change everything. That's the wrong contract, sir. The 60-story glass tower of Titan Tech headquarters pierced the skyline like a gleaming sword. Morning light bounced off its windows, casting diamond-shaped reflections across the bustling financial district below. Inside, on the top floor, Eva Coleman moved silently through the CEO's penthouse suite, a ghost in a gray uniform. She ran her cloth over the mahogany conference table, making small, practiced circles. At 30, Eva had mastered the art of invisibility. Keep your eyes down. Speak only when spoken to. Become furniture, useful but forgotten the moment you leave the room. Hey, window streaks. Again. Richard Carlton's voice sliced through the quiet like a paper cut. What do we pay you for? Eva turned to face the CEO of Titan Tech, her expression carefully neutral. I'll take care of it right away, Mr. Carlton. Richard barely glanced at her. 6'2", with silver-streaked dark hair and a jawline that belonged in luxury watch advertisements. He moved through the world as if it existed solely for his consumption. His custom Tom Ford suit probably cost more than Eva's monthly rent. Do that. The Halvix people will be here in an hour. Everything needs to be perfect. He tossed a thick folder onto his desk, sending several papers fluttering to the floor. And clean that up. Eva knelt to gather the scattered documents. As she collected the papers, her eyes caught something familiar, legal terminology she recognized. Instantly. Before working at Titan Tech, she'd spent 3 years as a legal assistant at Marshall & Brooks, one of the city's top corporate firms. Her fingers hesitated over a clause about intellectual property rights. Something felt off about the wording. The memory surfaced like a bubble in still water. She'd helped draft similar language for a different merger years ago, 5 years earlier. Eva, your attention to detail is impeccable, Thomas Marshall had said, his hand warm on her shoulder as they reviewed a contract together. Most people wouldn't have caught that discrepancy in the sublicensing clause. She'd smiled, proud. It was hidden well, almost like it was meant to be overlooked. That's why you're going to make an excellent lawyer someday, he'd replied. You see what others miss. The memory dissolved as Richard's voice cut through her thoughts. Today, not tomorrow, he snapped, gesturing at the papers in her hands. Eva blinked and quickly arranged the documents into a neat stack. Of course, sir. As she placed them on his desk, her trained eye caught a subtle inconsistency in the footer of one page. The document number ended with A, while the others ended with B. A small detail, but in her experience, version discrepancies were rarely accidental in high-stakes deals. The elevator chimed. Eva moved swiftly to the windows, spray bottle in hand. Julian Parker, Titan Tech's head of security, stepped into the penthouse first. Tall and broad-shouldered with close-cropped black hair, he was one of the few people who actually saw Eva as a person rather than an extension of the cleaning supplies she carried. All clear, Mr. Carlton, Julian announced, then stepped aside. To reveal their visitors, Grant Holloway strode in as if he owned the place. Halvix's lead negotiator had a smile that never reached his eyes and a handshake that lingered a second too long. Behind him followed a team of 3, 2 men and a woman, all carrying sleek leather portfolios. Richard, Grant said, spreading his arms. The day has finally come. Eva kept her head down, but her ears open as she wiped down the windows. Grant's voice had a musical quality to it, almost hypnotic. Merger of the decade, Richard replied. The press is already calling it that. Rightfully so. 100 million is just the beginning once we combine our technologies. Grant moved toward the conference area. Titan Tech is hardware, Halvix is software. We're going to rewrite the rules. Eva moved discreetly to the next window. Something about Grant made her skin prickle with unease. Perhaps it was the calculated warmth in his voice, or the way his eyes constantly scanned the room, assessing everything. Let's get down to business, Richard said. The sooner we finalize this, the sooner we pop champagne. For the next hour, Eva drifted around the penthouse, dusting surfaces that didn't need dusting, emptying trash bins that were barely filled. No one paid her any attention. She was just part of the furniture, a cleaning automaton programmed to disappear into the background. But she was listening. Carefully. The integration timeline seems ambitious. One of the Halvik's team members commented. We've already begun preparing our systems, Grant replied smoothly. By the time the ink is dry, we'll be halfway there. Eva replaced the tissue box on Richard's desk, her eyes flicking briefly to the contract pages spread out before him. There it was again, that strange version inconsistency. This time on page 12, a formatting difference so subtle most people would never notice. Mr. Carlton, she said softly when there was a brief lull in the conversation. Excuse me, there's a formatting inconsistency on page 12 you might want to check. The room fell silent. Richard looked at her as if a potted plant had suddenly spoken. You're a maid, he said flatly. Don't play lawyer. Grant's expression shifted momentarily. Something flashed in his eyes. Interest? Concern? It was gone too quickly to identify. I apologize, Eva said, lowering her gaze. I'll bring in fresh water. As she retreated to the kitchen area, she heard Grant laugh. Helpful staff you have, Richard. Proofreading your contracts now. She's confused, Richard replied dismissively. Probably mixing up the employee handbook with a $100 million merger agreement. Their laughter burned in Eva's ears as she filled water pitchers. She knew what she'd seen, and she knew what it might mean. The meeting concluded around noon. As the Halvik's team prepared to leave, Grant turned to Richard with a friendly clap on the shoulder. We'll see you at the press event tomorrow. Bring your best smile. Photographers from every tech publication will be there. The collaboration of the decade deserves nothing less, Richard replied. Eva watched them leave, her mind working through what she'd observed. Something didn't add up. Later that afternoon, as the office began to empty, Eva encountered Julian by the security desk. His warm smile was a stark contrast to the coldness she'd faced all day. Rough one? He asked, noticing her expression. Eva sighed. Just the usual. Rich people being rich people. Julian chuckled. Tell me about it. Been watching those Halvik's folks on the security feed. Bunch of them were in the building until 3 a.m. last night. What kind of merger needs midnight meetings? Eva's interest peaked. Which floor? 23. Where all the legal teams work. Julian shrugged. Something about these guys stinks if you ask me. Too polished. Like they're putting on a show. I think you might be right, Eva said softly after. Finishing her shift, Eva took the service elevator down to the maintenance level. Most days, she'd head straight home to her tiny studio apartment. But tonight she had a detour to make. The document processing room was where all the company's paperwork went to be copied, scanned, or destroyed. At this hour, it was deserted. Eva slipped inside and headed straight for the large industrial shredder in the corner. She'd seen Richard's assistant Emily dumping a stack of papers there just before she left. If Eva's hunch was correct, she carefully opened the shredder bin. Most of the contents were already destroyed, but a few pages had jammed the mechanism. Eva gently extracted them, spreading them out on a nearby table. Her heart raced as she confirmed what she'd suspected: two different versions of the same contract section. One with a critical intellectual property clause intact, the other with the clause mysteriously absent. The implications were enormous. If the wrong version was signed, Titan Tech could lose ownership of their core technology. Eva quickly photographed both pages with her phone, then carefully tore off a small piece of the altered document as physical proof. She tucked it into her uniform pocket just as the door opened. What are you doing in here? Emily stood in the doorway, her expression suspicious. Eva gestured to her cleaning cart. Just emptying trash bins before I clock out. Emily glanced at the shredder, then back at Eva. Well, hurry up. I'm setting the alarm in 5 minutes. After Emily left, Eva quickly returned the pages to the shredder bin, making sure to mix them with the other shredded documents. The piece of evidence in her pocket felt like it was burning a hole through the fabric. Tomorrow night, Titan Tech would host a lavish dinner for both executive teams before the final contract signing. Eva would be there, serving champagne and canapes, invisible as always. But this time, her invisibility might be her greatest strength. because something wasn't right about this merger, and she seemed to be the only one who noticed or cared. As she wheeled her cart toward the service exit, Eva thought about how far she'd fallen, from promising legal assistant to invisible maid. But perhaps her downfall had put her in exactly the right place at exactly the right time. She took one last glance at the Titan Tech Tower as she left the building. Behind its gleaming windows, a massive fraud might be unfolding, and somehow she was going to stop it. The next evening, Titan Tech's executive dining room sparkled with crystal and silver. Eva moved efficiently between tables, arranging place settings with military precision. The merger celebration dinner would begin in just over an hour, bringing together both companies' leadership teams before tomorrow's contract signing. As she worked, snippets of conversation drifted toward her from the anteroom, where caterers were setting up. Grant Holloway's distinctive voice carried through the partially open door. "By this time tomorrow, we'll own the software rights before they even realize it," he was saying to someone. The beauty of burying things in legal language. Eva slowed her movements, straining to hear more. "Are you sure Carlton hasn't caught on?" Another voice asked. Grant laughed. "The man's ego is our best ally. He's so focused on being the CEO who landed the merger of the decade that he's not even reading what he's signing." Eva's hands trembled slightly as she placed the last fork. Her suspicions were confirming themselves in real time. "Coleman." She jumped at the sound of her name. Julian stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "Sorry," he said, lowering his voice. "Didn't mean to startle you. Can we talk? Somewhere. Private." They slipped into a small staff break room. Julian closed the door behind them. "I found something," he said without preamble. "In the basement archives. An old laptop one of the Halvik's consultants left behind 3 months ago when they first started discussing the merger. IT logged it, but never followed up." Eva's eyes widened. "What's on it?" "That's the thing. It's password protected." "But..." He hesitated. "You mentioned you used to work in legal? Maybe you'd have better luck figuring it out than me." She shouldn't get involved. She'd already lost one career by sticking her neck out. But the memory of Grant's smug voice made her decision easy. "I can try," she said. "Can you get it to me?" Julian nodded. "End of your shift. I'll meet you by the loading dock." True to his word, Julian handed her a sleek laptop bag as she prepared to leave that night. "Be careful with this," he warned. "If anyone asks, you never saw it." In her tiny apartment, Eva sat cross-legged on her bed and powered up the laptop. The login screen appeared, requesting a password. She tried a few obvious combinations: Halvik's, merger, Titan Tech, without success. Then she remembered something she'd overheard Grant say earlier. "Project Takeover is right on schedule." She typed "Project Takeover," and the screen unlocked. For the next 2 hours, Eva combed through the laptop's contents. Most files were innocuous: PowerPoint presentations, market analyses, integration timelines. But then she found a hidden folder, labeled simply PT. Inside were dozens of emails detailing Halvik's true intentions. The merger wasn't a merger at all. It was a calculated takeover designed to acquire Titan Tech's proprietary technology while assuming none of its debt. The smoking gun was a detailed plan to slip in an altered version of the contract at the last minute. Eva covered her mouth in shock as she read an email from Grant to his team. "Make sure version B is the one that makes it to the signing table. Version A is our insurance policy only." The implications were staggering. She had to warn someone. But who would believe a maid? The answer came to her suddenly. Patricia Townsend, Titan Tech's chief operating officer. Unlike Richard, Ms. Townsend had always treated Eva with basic respect. More importantly, she had a reputation for ironclad integrity. The next morning, Eva deliberately timed her cleaning rounds to coincide with Ms. Townsend's coffee break. She found the COO alone in the executive lounge, reviewing documents. "Excuse me, Ms. Townsend." Eva approached cautiously. "May I speak with you for a moment? It's important." Patricia looked up, her gray eyes sharp behind stylish glasses. "Of course. What is it, Eva?" The fact that Ms. Townsend knew her name was a promising start. Eva took a deep breath. "I believe there's something wrong with the Halvik's contract," she said quietly. "I've noticed discrepancies between different versions, particularly regarding intellectual property rights." Patricia's expression remained neutral, but her eyes narrowed slightly. "That's a very serious claim. May I ask how you've come to this conclusion?" I used to work as a legal assistant before I came here, Eva explained. I'm familiar with contract language, and what I've seen doesn't add up. Patricia studied her for a long moment. Why are you telling me this and not Mr. Carlton? I tried. He dismissed me. The COO sighed. Why should I trust a maid over the CEO's judgment? The words stung, but Eva kept her composure. Because sometimes the people cleaning up messes are the first to notice when something's wrong. Patricia seemed to consider this. I appreciate your concern, Eva, but without concrete evidence, there's little I can do. Frustrated but not surprised, Eva nodded and returned to her cart. She needed something more compelling than her word against Richards. That night, Eva created an anonymous email account and sent Ms. Townsend screenshots of the altered clause buried on page 34 of the contract. She didn't explain how she'd obtained them, just included a simple message. Compare this to what's on record. The real merger isn't what you think. The next morning, Eva was cleaning the executive bathroom when her phone buzzed. It was a call from a number she hadn't seen in years. Maya, she answered hesitantly. Eva. Her sister's voice was tense. I just saw a news story about Titan Tech's big merger tomorrow. You still work there, right? Yes, but listen to me carefully, Maya interrupted. Stay away from this. Don't get involved in any corporate messes. Not again. Eva moved deeper into the bathroom, lowering her voice. What are you talking about? I have friends who still work at Marshall & Brooks. There are rumors about this Halvik's deal. Bad ones. Maya paused. You exposed fraud once before, and look what it got you. Framed and blacklisted. Don't make the same mistake twice. The memory flashed through Eva's mind. The partners' faces when she presented evidence of billing fraud. Their initial shock giving way to calculated anger. The fabricated evidence of her incompetence. The humiliating dismissal. I can't just look the other way, Maya. Yes, you can. It's not your company. Not your problem. After they hung up, Eva leaned against the cool tile wall, trying to steady her breathing. Her sister was right about the risks. But could she really stand by and watch another fraud unfold when she had the power to stop it? Her thoughts were interrupted by footsteps. She quickly grabbed her cleaning supplies and stepped out of the stall, only to find herself face to face with Grant Holloway. Well, hello there, he said, his smile not reaching his eyes. Eva, isn't it? A chill ran down her spine. Yes, sir. Can I help you with something? Just looking for the executive washroom. His gaze traveled slowly over her uniform, then back to her face. You know, you seem very attentive for someone in your position. Eva kept her expression neutral. Just doing my job, sir. Of course. Grant nodded, then added casually, Richard mentioned you had some thoughts on our contract. I must have misspoken, Eva replied carefully. I'm not qualified to comment on such matters. Grant's smile widened a fraction. Good. Know your place. That's important in a corporate environment. He stepped closer, his cologne overpowering. People who forget their place tend to find themselves in unfortunate situations. The threat couldn't have been clearer if he'd spelled it out. Eva nodded slightly and moved past him, fighting to keep her hands from shaking. Later that day, Eva noticed Grant in deep conversation with Richard near the executive elevator. Grant's posture was casual, but there was something predatory in his stance. How well do you know your cleaning staff? She overheard him ask. Richard laughed. I don't. That's the point. They're interchangeable. That one, Eva, I think, seems unusually interested in our paperwork. Richard waved dismissively. She's harmless. Probably just trying to look important. Eva ducked into a supply closet before they could spot her, her heart pounding. Grant was suspicious, which meant she needed to be even more careful at the end of her shift. Eva opened her locker to find a folded piece of paper that hadn't been there that morning. Her hands trembled slightly as she unfolded it. Back off. Or disappear again. 5 words. No signature needed. Eva quickly photographed the note, then tucked it into her pocket alongside the contract fragment. The stakes had just gotten much higher as she walked toward the exit. She spotted Ms. Townsend in an empty conference room, papers spread across the table. The COO was comparing 2 documents side by side, her expression growing increasingly troubled. Eva knew instantly what she was looking at, the contract versions. Her anonymous email had worked. Patricia was investigating that a small flame of hope flickered to life inside her. She wasn't alone in this fight anymore. That feeling was short-lived. As she rounded the corner toward the security desk, she saw Richard storming toward Patricia's office, his face flushed with anger. Eva slipped into an alcove and listened. "Who authorized you to review the final contract?" Richard demanded, his voice carrying down the hallway. "As COO, I have every right," Patricia began. "You're undermining me," Richard cut her off. "Questioning my judgment on the most important deal in our company's history." "I'm doing my job," Patricia replied calmly. "And my job includes due diligence." "Your job is whatever I say it is," Richard snapped. "The contract is fine. I've reviewed it personally. Drop this nonsense immediately." Their voices faded as they moved deeper into the office, but Eva had heard enough. Richard was either complicit or willfully blind. Either way, Patricia's concerns had been shut down. The signing ceremony was scheduled for 10 a.m. tomorrow, less than 24 hours away. If Eva was going to act, it had to be now. She pulled out her phone and texted Julian, "Need to talk. Urgent." His reply came immediately. "Loading dock. 10 minutes." Outside, the night air was cool against Eva's face. Julian was waiting beside his car, his expression concerned. "What's happening?" he asked. "It's worse than we thought," Eva told him. "Halvix isn't merging with Titan Tech. They're stealing it. And I think they know I'm onto them." Julian's face hardened. "Tell me what you need." Eva took a deep breath. "I need to get into the legal department after hours. Tonight." He hesitated only briefly before nodding. "I'm on second shift. I can get you in around midnight." "But Eva, this could cost both our jobs." "If this deal goes through, a lot of people will lose their jobs," she replied. "And Titan Tech will lose everything." Julian studied her face for a long moment. "Okay, but we do this carefully. Meet me at the service entrance at midnight. Wear dark colors." As Eva walked to her bus stop, she felt a strange mix of terror and determination. 5 years ago, she tried to do the right thing and lost everything. Tonight, she might lose what little she had left, but some things were worth the risk. And sometimes, the smallest voices spoke the most important truths. The truth was hiding in plain sight, buried in legal jargon and corporate doublespeak. Tonight, she would find it. Tomorrow, she would speak it, even if no one wanted to hear .as. The bus pulled away from the curb. Eva looked back at the Titan Tech Tower, its upper floors still illuminated against the night sky. By this time tomorrow, everything would be different. Point one way or another. The service entrance to Titan Tech was dimly lit at midnight, casting long shadows across the empty loading dock. Eva hugged her dark jacket tighter around her body, scanning the area nervously. Her breath formed small clouds in the chilly night air as she waited. A soft click caught her attention. Julian emerged from a side door, dressed in his security uniform. He motioned for her to hurry. "We have about 20 minutes before the next security sweep," he whispered as she slipped inside. "The cameras on the 23rd floor are on a loop. It won't hold for long." They moved silently through the building's service corridors, avoiding the main hallways where security cameras would be active. The emptiness of the massive building at night was eerie. No phones ringing, no keyboards clicking, just the distant hum of air conditioning. "Why are you helping me?" Eva asked softly as they rode the service elevator upward. "You're risking everything." Julian's expression was serious in the dim light. "My dad lost his pension when his company got swindled in a merger like this. Watched him work as a grocery store greeter until he was 78. He shook his head. "Some things are worth the risk." The elevator doors opened to a dark hallway. The legal department of Titan Tech occupied the entire 23rd floor, rows of offices surrounding a central area filled with paralegals' desks. Eva moved quickly to the records room, where she knew the digital archive terminals were located. 3 years of working in a law firm had taught her exactly where to look. "Stand watch," she whispered to Julian, who nodded and positioned himself near the door. Eva's fingers flew across the keyboard, navigating through folders of documents. She found what she was looking for in a subfolder labeled Halvix Integration Original Drafts. She quickly located the PDF of the original contract draft from 6 weeks earlier. "Got it," she murmured, plugging in a small flash drive. As the file copied, she pulled out her phone and took photos of several key pages. The contract in front of her was clean and straightforward, a genuine merger of equals with balanced benefits. She then pulled up the most recent version she'd photographed from Richard's desk and compared them side by side. My God, she whispered. The difference was stark once you knew what to look for. The final version shifted all patent rights to Halvix. Under the guise of integration efficiency, it was a hostile takeover hidden in legal jargon. The key clause on page 34 had been completely rewritten. In the original, Titan Tech retained rights to all its existing technology. In the new version, those rights transferred to a joint holdings entity, which would be controlled entirely by Halvix according to a buried subsection. Hurry, Julian urged from the doorway. Someone's coming. Eva quickly emailed herself both versions using a secure account, then removed her flash drive. They ducked into a supply closet just as the night cleaning crew passed by. We need more proof, Eva whispered once they were clear. Something that shows intent. Julian thought for a moment. The executive conference room on 22. They've been having their strategy meetings there. Maybe they left something behind. They took the stairs down one floor. The conference room was dark, but a blinking light from an overhead projector cast faint blue pulses across the glossy table. Eva carefully checked the room's small trash bin and found several crumpled notes. One contained a handwritten list of post-acquisition priorities with phase-out Titan Tech brand as the first item. This isn't a merger, Eva said, showing Julian. It's an execution. Back in her apartment at 2 a.m., Eva stared at her laptop screen, reviewing everything they'd found. The evidence was damning, but she needed legal expertise to confirm her suspicions. After a moment's hesitation, she composed an email to Ria Mehta, a corporate lawyer she'd worked with before her fall from grace. Ria, I know it's been years, but I need your help. Can you review these documents anonymously? I think I've uncovered a major corporate fraud. Eva attached the contract versions without company names, then hit send before she could change her mind. She collapsed into bed, exhausted but too wired to sleep. Tomorrow would decide everything. The morning sun had barely cleared the horizon when Eva's phone buzzed with a text message from Julian. Security footage shows you in legal last night. Grant asking questions. Be careful. Her stomach dropped. She'd been identified despite their precautions. Grant was closing in. She dressed quickly in her maid's uniform, hands trembling slightly. As she was about to leave for work, her email pinged with a reply from Ria. Call me. Now. What you found is serious. Eva's bus ride to Titan Tech felt like a journey to the gallows. She kept her head down, rehearsing what she would say if confronted. The lobby was busier than usual, filled with people setting up for the signing ceremony. Reporters chatted in clusters, television crews adjusted lighting, and PR staff scurried about with clipboards. She slipped in through the service entrance and headed straight for the locker room. As she changed into her work smock, Beth, another cleaning staff member, approached her. Eva, Mr. Andrews from security wants to see you. Right away. Eva's heart pounded as she made her way to the security office. Had Julian been caught? Was she about to be fired? Or worse? To her surprise, it wasn't Julian waiting for her, but Grant Holloway himself, along with an older man she recognized. As Titan Tech's head of security, Ms. Coleman, Grant said smoothly, we have a situation that requires your attention. The security director, Mr. Andrews, looked uncomfortable. Several documents were accessed last night without authorization. The system logs show your employee ID was used. That's impossible, Eva said, feigning confusion. I left at my regular time yesterday. Grant's smile didn't reach his eyes. Perhaps someone borrowed your ID card? Or maybe you forgot to log out of a terminal. Eva maintained her composure. I'm very careful with my credentials, sir. Well, Grant continued, we've also found these in your cleaning cart. He gestured to the table where several folders labeled confidential were spread out. Care to explain? Eva's blood ran cold. The documents hadn't been in her cart. They'd been planted. Those aren't mine, she said firmly. I've never seen them before. The security director frowned. Ms. Coleman, stealing intellectual property is grounds for immediate termination and possibly criminal charges. I didn't take anything, Eva insisted, her mind racing. This was a setup. Grant was trying to neutralize her before she could expose him. I think we should call the police, Grant suggested, his voice heavy with false concern. Before anyone could respond, the door opened and Julian walked in. Sir, I need to speak with you, he said to Andrews. It's urgent. Andrews hesitated, then stepped outside with Julian. Eva could hear their muffled voices through the door. Grant watched her with calculated amusement. "You know," he said quietly, "cleaning staff are so easy to replace. No one even notices when they're gone." The threat hung in the air between them. Eva met his gaze steadily, refusing to be intimidated. Andrews returned, his expression troubled. "Mr. Holloway, we have a situation upstairs that requires attention. Miss Coleman, please wait here." After they left, Julian slipped back in. "I showed Andrews the security footage that proves those documents were planted in your cart by one of Grant's people. He's reviewing it now with Miss Townsend." "Townsend?" Eva's eyes widened. "Why is she involved?" "Because I brought her the data you found," Julian admitted, "after I saw they were setting you up. She's convinced. She's been running a secret audit of all the contract versions since yesterday." Relief flooded through Eva. "Thank you," she whispered. Julian squeezed her shoulder. "This isn't over. They'll try something else." He was right. By mid-afternoon, Eva had been released, but noticed Grant's people watching her every move. The signing ceremony was scheduled for 10 a.m. tomorrow. Time was running out. Her phone rang as she was cleaning the executive bathroom. It was Rhea. "Eva, I've reviewed everything," Rhea said without preamble. "If Titan Tech's CEO signs this contract, they'll lose everything. It's a corporate heist dressed as a merger." "I knew it," Eva breathed. "Can you put that in writing? Something official I can show people." "Already done. Sending you a legal opinion letter right now." "But Eva," Rhea paused. "Be careful. People who orchestrate this kind of fraud don't back down easily. They'll destroy anyone who gets in there." "Wait." Eva thought of the threatening note, the planted documents. "I know, but I can't let this happen." After her shift ended, Eva met Julian in the parking garage. "We need to get this to Richard directly," she said, showing him Rhea's legal opinion. Julian shook his head. "He won't listen. Grant's got him completely convinced this merger is his legacy. His ego won't let him see the truth." "Then we go public," Eva decided. "Tomorrow, at the signing ceremony." Julian looked alarmed. "That's suicide. You'll never work again." "I barely work now," Eva said with a bitter smile. "But if we don't stop this, hundreds of people will lose their jobs when Halvik's guts Titan Tech after the takeover." They spent the evening planning their approach. The signing ceremony would be attended by board members, executives, and press. If Eva could present the evidence at the right moment, the public exposure would force the board to pause the deal that IT was nearly midnight when Eva returned to her apartment. As she unlocked her door, she sensed something was wrong. Her tiny studio had been searched, drawers slightly ajar, papers moved. The laptop was gone. They were eliminating evidence. But they didn't know she had copies of everything on her phone, and the flash drive hidden in the lining of her uniform pocket. Eva didn't sleep that night. Instead, she prepared for the most important moment of her life. By morning, she was exhausted but resolute. She dressed in her maid's uniform one more time and headed to Titan Tech for what might be her last day. The 60th floor of Titan Tech headquarters hummed with excitement. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city as staff made final preparations for the signing ceremony. Crystal glasses sparkled on trays, champagne chilled in silver buckets, and cameras were positioned for the historic moment. Eva moved quietly through the controlled chaos, straightening tablecloths and arranging place cards with steady hands. No one paid her any attention, just another uniformed worker in the background of their corporate triumph. From her position near the refreshment table, she could see the main boardroom where the signing would take place. A massive oval table dominated the space, surrounded by leather chairs. At its head stood a smaller table with the merger documents arranged in a leather portfolio, the documents that would destroy Titan Tech if signed. Her phone vibrated in her pocket. A text from Julian. "In position. Townsend is on board. Wait for my signal." Eva released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Having the COO's support might make the difference between being heard and being dragged out by security. "Coleman." The sharp voice of Emily, Richard's assistant, cut through her thoughts. "You're needed in the boardroom. More water glasses." Eva nodded and gathered a tray of water carafes. As she entered the boardroom, she saw Richard speaking with two board members. He looked triumphant, almost giddy with anticipation. "Gentlemen, by noon today, Titan Tech will be positioned to dominate the market for the next decade," he was saying. "This merger is my gift to the shareholders." Eva set out the water glasses, keeping her head down but her ears open. The press is already calling it the deal of the century. One of the board members remarked. Richard's smile widened. Just wait until they see the valuation after integration. We'll be untouchable. If you only knew what you were actually signing. Eva thought. At by 9:45 a.m., the room began to fill. Board members in expensive suits mingled with senior executives. The Halvik's team arrived as a group, Grant leading them with the confident stride of a conqueror. Eva noticed Ms. Townsend enter last, her face composed but her eyes watchful. Their gazes met briefly. Townsend gave an almost imperceptible nod at precisely 10 a.m. Richard called the room to order. Ladies and gentlemen, today marks a historic moment for Titan Tech and Halvik's. Two industry leaders joining forces to create an unstoppable technology powerhouse. Applause filled the room. Camera shutters clicked rapidly. Grant stepped forward to stand beside Richard, his smile calculated and sharp. This partnership represents the future, Grant declared. Together, we'll innovate beyond what either company could achieve alone. More applause. Eva positioned herself near the signing table, ostensibly to refill water glasses. Julian stood by the main door, his security uniform giving him legitimate reason to be present. Richard continued with a brief speech about vision and synergy, words that meant nothing in light of what Eva knew. Finally, the moment arrived. Without further delay, let's make history, Richard announced. He sat at the head of the table as Grant's assistant placed the contract before him. The room fell silent as Richard uncapped an expensive fountain pen. For prosperity, he said with a smile, signing the first page with a flourish. The assembled executives and board members applauded again. Richard turned to the next page, initialing. In the designated spot, page after page, he moved through the document, barely glancing at the content he was approving. Eva watched in growing anxiety. He was almost at the final signature page, the point of no return. Julian caught her eye from across the room and nodded slightly. It was now or never. As Richard reached for the final signature page, Eva stepped forward, a printed document in her hand. She moved to stand directly beside him, close enough that only he could hear her. That's the wrong contract, she whispered. The room fell silent. Richard froze, pen hovering above the page. He turned to look at her, confusion giving way to anger. What did you say? He asked, his voice dangerously low. Eva stood her ground. This isn't the contract your board approved. The IP rights clause has been altered. Richard's face flushed red. Security, remove her immediately. Before anyone could move, Patricia Townsend rose from her seat. Wait, she said firmly. I've reviewed the documentation. Ms. Coleman is correct. The tension in the room thickened as Ms. Townsend walked to the table and placed her own printout beside the contract. This version isn't what we approved in the board meeting last month. Several key clauses have been modified. Richard's expression shifted from anger to confusion. What are you talking about? Grant stepped forward smoothly. This is absurd. The contract has been thoroughly vetted by both legal teams. Eva reached into her pocket and pulled out a flash drive. This contains the email trail, the clause changes, and a recording of Mr. Holloway laughing about the setup. She handed it to Martin Williams, Titan Tech's in-house counsel, who had risen from his seat with a troubled expression. These are serious allegations, Williams said carefully. We should review this immediately. Grant lunged forward. This is outrageous. She's a maid, for God's sake. A maid who used to be a legal assistant at Marshall & Brooks. Eva replied steadily. Until I reported fraud there too. The boardroom erupted into chaos. Board members demanded explanations. The press tried to ask questions, and Grant's team huddled together in urgent whispers. Williams inserted the flash drive into his laptop and began reviewing the contents. His expression grew increasingly grim as he scrolled through the evidence. Mr. Carlton, he finally said, there appears to be significant discrepancies between this contract and the version approved by the board, most notably in the intellectual property section. Richard's face had gone from red to ashen. Show me, he demanded. The room fell silent again as Williams projected the clause onto the wall screen. Side by side, the differences were unmistakable. The version you were about to sign, Williams explained, would transfer all of Titan Tech's patents and proprietary technology, to a holding company controlled by Halvix. Richard's eyes widened as the full implications hit him. That's not possible. I reviewed this myself. You reviewed what they wanted you to see, Eva said quietly. Richard stared at her, truly seeing her for perhaps the first time. He remembered dismissing her warning days ago. You're a maid. Don't play lawyer. The memory of his own arrogance made him wince. The chairman of the board, Robert Harrison, stood up. In light of these revelations, I'm calling for an immediate halt to this proceeding. We need to investigate these allegations thoroughly. Grant's composure finally cracked. This is a setup. This woman has clearly falsified evidence to disrupt a legitimate business transaction. The evidence speaks for itself, Miss Townsend replied coldly. The question is whether you were going to tell us about the altered clauses before or after. We discovered them. Harrison turned to the press representatives who were frantically taking notes. I must ask all media to leave the room. This is now an internal matter requiring privacy. As security began escorting journalists out, Harrison added, and someone contact the SEC. If there's been an attempt to defraud Titan Tech, they need to be informed immediately. Grant's face hardened. You'll regret this, he hissed at Richard. All of you. Richard seemed not to hear him. He was still staring at the contract, then at Eva, his world tilting on its axis. Harrison gestured to Julian. Please escort Miss Coleman out as well, and ensure she's available for further questions. Eva nodded and allowed Julian to lead her. From the boardroom, as the door closed behind them, she finally let out the breath she'd been holding. Her hands were shaking. You did it, Julian whispered as they walked toward the elevator. You actually did it. In the hallway outside, chaos continued to unfold. Grant and his team were being detained by security while board members huddled. Intense conversation. Through the glass walls, Eva could see Richard sitting alone at the table, staring at the unsigned contract with a stunned expression. He'd finally realized how close he'd come to destroying his own company. Julian guided Eva to an empty conference room and closed the door. Are you okay? She nodded, though in truth she felt lightheaded with adrenaline and relief. What happens now? The board's calling an emergency session, Julian explained. Townsend told me to keep you here until they're ready to talk to you. Eva sank into a chair, suddenly aware of how exhausted she was. They'll try to bury this. Corporations always do. Not this time, Julian said firmly. Too many people saw what happened. The press may have been kicked out, but they already have the story. Maid saves tech giant from $100 million scam. That headline writes itself. Eva smiled faintly. I didn't do it for headlines. I know. Julian squeezed her shoulder. You did it because it was right. A knock at the door interrupted them. Ms. Townsend entered, her expression unreadable. The board would like to speak with you, Miss Coleman, she said formally. Then, more softly, thank you for your courage today. It couldn't have been easy. Eva straightened her uniform and stood tall. She'd entered the building that morning as a maid, invisible and overlooked. She would leave it as something else entirely. I'm ready, she said as she walked back toward the boardroom. Eva caught her reflection in the glass walls, still in her gray uniform, but standing straight, head high. For the first time in years, she recognized herself. The whisper that had been ignored days ago had finally been heard. And nothing would ever be the same again. The aftermath of the failed signing ceremony was immediate and chaotic. Security personnel escorted journalists from the building, but the damage was already done. Most had witnessed Eva's intervention and Ms. Townsend's confirmation. By the time the elevator doors closed on the last reporter, phones were already buzzing with notifications as the story broke online. Titan Tech merger halted after last-minute fraud allegation, read the first headline that flashed across screens throughout the financial district. Inside the executive floor, Titan Tech's PR team huddled in crisis mode. Phones rang incessantly. Board members congregated in small groups, their expressions grim. Grant Holloway and his Halvix team were sequestered in a conference room, surrounded by Titan Tech's security personnel. Richard Carlton slammed his office door so hard the glass wall beside it vibrated. His face was flushed, veins standing out on his forehead as he paced the length of his corner office. The humiliation burned through him like acid. He'd been moments away from signing away his company's most valuable assets on live television. Outside his door, Emily frantically fielded calls from shareholders demanding explanations. Eva sat alone in a small meeting room, hands folded in her lap. The adrenaline that had carried her through the confrontation was fading, leaving her drained and uncertain. She'd stopped a fraud, yes, but at what cost to herself? She had no illusions that standing up to powerful men would end well for her. It never had before. The door opened, and Ms. Townsend entered with an older man Eva recognized as Walter Bennett, one of Titan Tech's longest-serving board members. "Ms. Coleman," Bennett said, studying her with keen blue eyes. "I believe we owe you our gratitude." Eva straightened in her chair. "I was just doing what anyone would do." "No," Bennett replied, taking a seat across from her. "You did what most people wouldn't dare to do. You may have just saved this company, Miss Coleman." Miss Townsend sat beside him. "The board is convening an emergency session to review the evidence you provided. In the meantime, we have some questions about how you discovered the discrepancies." For the next hour, Eva walked them through everything, finding the different contract versions, Julian helping her access the records room, discovering Grant's emails on the forgotten laptop. She omitted only Ria's involvement, protecting her former colleague from potential backlash. "And you were previously employed as a legal assistant?" Bennett asked. Eva nodded. "At Marshall and Brooks. For 3 years. May I ask why you left that position?" The question she'd been dreading. Eva took a deep breath. "I reported billing fraud I discovered in one of the firm's major accounts. Shortly after, documents were falsified to make it appear I'd made serious errors. I was terminated." Bennett and Townsend exchanged glances. "That explains your attention to detail," Bennett said finally. "And your courage." After they left, Eva checked her phone. 17 missed calls, 15 from reporters, 1 from her sister, and 1 from Julian. She texted Julian, "Still here. What's happening outside?" His reply came immediately, "Complete chaos. Halvik's stock down 8% already. Reporters everywhere. You okay?" Before she could respond, the door opened again. This time it was Robert Harrison, the board chairman, accompanied by Martin Williams, Titan Tech's general counsel. "Ms. Coleman," Harrison began formally, "the board has reviewed the evidence and found it compelling enough to halt the merger proceedings indefinitely. We are notifying the SEC and initiating a forensic review of all communications with Halvik's." Williams nodded. "The altered clauses would have effectively transferred control of our core technology to Halvik's while leaving us with all operational liabilities. It was quite sophisticated." "Not sophisticated enough," Eva said quietly. Harrison's stern expression softened slightly. "Indeed, your intervention was timely." Eva recognized the deliberate understatement for what it was, grudging appreciation wrapped in corporate restraint. "What happens now?" she asked. "That depends," Harrison replied. "Halvik's is already issuing denials. Grant Holloway has released a statement calling the accusations ridiculous and claiming Titan Tech is sabotaging the merger for unknown reasons. He's threatening legal action for defamation." Eva wasn't surprised. Check his private emails from March 15th. He explicitly discusses the bait-and-switch strategy. Williams raised an eyebrow. "You're certain?" "I saw it myself. It's on the flash drive I provided." Harrison studied her for a long moment. "You have a remarkable memory, Miss Coleman. Details matter in legal work," she replied simply. "So they do." Harrison stood. "We'll be in touch. In the meantime, we've arranged for a security escort to take you home. The media attention may be intrusive." As Eva was led through a private exit to avoid the press gathered at the main entrance, she caught a glimpse of the lobby television. The ticker across the bottom read, "Breaking, recording surfaces of Halvik's CEO mocking Titan Tech before merger." Someone had leaked Grant's damning conversation already. The swift response suggested Ms. Townsend or someone on the board was making strategic moves to control the narrative. By the time Eva reached her apartment building, Halvik's stock had plummeted 15% and was still falling. Trading was halted twice during the afternoon as investors frantically dumped shares. Her phone rang as she unlocked her door. It was Maya. "Eva," her sister's voice was tight with concern. "You're all over the news. What have you done?" "My job," Eva replied, dropping onto her sofa. "Just not the one they were paying me for. This is exactly what I warned you about. These people will destroy you. They have resources, connections, and I have evidence." Eva cut in. "Hard proof, Maya. Not just suspicions like last time." There was a long pause. "Are you okay?" The Simple question, free of judgment, brought unexpected tears to Eva's eyes. I don't know yet, but I couldn't just watch it happen. I know, Maya sighed. It's who you are. Just be careful, okay? These people play for keeps. That evening, Eva watched Richard Carlton's emergency press conference on her laptop. Flanked by Harrison and Williams, Richard looked haggard but composed as he addressed the cameras. Titan Tech takes these allegations extremely seriously, he said, reading from prepared remarks. We have initiated a comprehensive review of the merger documentation and have identified concerning irregularities that warrant further investigation. Not once did he mention Eva's role. Instead, he carefully crafted a narrative where the company's robust compliance protocols had identified potential discrepancies. A staff member flagged a discrepancy. That's all, Richard stated when pressed by a reporter. Our legal team immediately conducted a review, which led to today's decision to pause the proceedings. Eva watched him lie with a hollow feeling in her stomach. She hadn't expected gratitude, but the complete erasure of her contribution stung nonetheless. Her phone buzzed with a text from Julian. Watching this BS? Don't worry, truth always finds a way out. She smiled faintly. Perhaps it did. Eva spent a restless night considering her options. She could walk away now, find another job, perhaps in another city, and leave Titan Tech to its fate. Part of her wanted to let Richard and his board clean up their own mess. They clearly had no intention of acknowledging her role anyway. But the next morning, as she prepared to pack her few belongings, there was a knock at her door. Julian stood in the hallway, accompanied by Miss Townsend. May we come in? Townsend asked. Eva's apartment was tiny, barely 400 square feet with a kitchenette, a small table with 2 chairs, and a sofa that doubled as her bed. She felt a flash of embarrassment as they entered, but Townsend didn't seem to notice the cramped conditions. You're planning to leave, Townsend said, noting the half-packed suitcase. Seems like the sensible option, Eva replied. I doubt my uniform still fits after yesterday. That would be a mistake, Julian interjected. This isn't just about them anymore, Eva. It's about what's right. Julian is correct, Townsend added. There's more at stake than Titan Tech's reputation. Halvix has attempted similar tactics with other companies. You've exposed a pattern of corporate fraud that affects the entire industry. Eva looked between them, uncertain. What difference does it make if I stay or go? Richard's already rewriting history to erase my involvement. That's precisely why you should stay, Townsend said firmly. Don't let them control the narrative. Before Eva could respond, her phone rang with an unknown number. She almost ignored it, but something made her answer. Is this Eva Coleman? A woman's voice asked. Yes. Who's calling? Sarah Chun from the Wall Street Journal. I'm working on a story about the Titan Tech Halvix merger collapse. Sources tell me you were instrumental in identifying the fraudulent contract changes. Eva's eyes widened as she looked at Townsend, who gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. I'm afraid I can't comment at this time, Eva replied carefully. Perhaps I can provide some context, the reporter continued. We've received information about a board meeting at Titan Tech this morning. Apparently, several members are pushing to remove Richard Carlton as CEO, citing negligence that nearly cost the company billions. Would you care to comment on that? Eva's shock must have shown on her face because Julian raised his eyebrows questioningly. She covered the phone. They're trying to oust Richard, she whispered. Townsend's expression remained neutral, but there was a glint of satisfaction in her eyes. No comment, Eva told the reporter and ended the call. The board's moving against Richard? She asked Townsend. Directly. Some members feel his judgment has been compromised, Townsend replied diplomatically. His eagerness for the merger blinded him to obvious red flags. That's not a quality shareholders value in a CEO. Julian grinned. Karma's a hell of a thing. Before they could discuss further, Eva's phone rang again. This time, it was Rhea Mehta. Eva, Rhea sounded excited. Have you seen the news? Which part? A reporter just ran a story on your whistleblowing at Marshall and Brooks. They're connecting it to what happened at Titan Tech, calling it redemption for the Maid. It's trending on social media. Eva felt dizzy. How did they? It wasn't me, Rhea said quickly. But that's not why I'm calling. I've had 3 law firms contact me asking about you in the last hour. Plus a hedge fund looking for a compliance specialist. You're holding The keys to something bigger than that building. Eva, don't let this moment pass. After Rhea hung up, Eva sat in stunned silence. Townsend watched her thoughtfully. The question isn't whether you should leave Titan Tech, Townsend said finally. It's what you want to do next. Because you have options now, probably more than you realize. Eva looked around her tiny apartment, the place she'd ended up after losing everything. Yesterday, she'd been invisible. Today, people were fighting over who got to claim credit for her actions, while others were offering her opportunities. I need to think, she said finally. Julian nodded. Take your time, but don't disappear on us, okay? Some of us are on your side. After they left, Eva opened her laptop and found the article Rhea had mentioned. There she was, in her maid's uniform from yesterday, caught in a moment of determination as she stood beside Richard at the signing table. The headline read, "The Whisper That Saved Titan Tech: How a Former Whistleblower Stopped a $100 million Fraud." The story detailed her history at Marshall & Brooks, painting her as a persistent truth-teller who had been punished for her integrity once before. It quoted anonymous sources praising her attention to detail and courage. The final paragraph was what caught her breath. Sources close to Titan Tech's board indicate that Coleman's actions may have exposed fatal flaws in the company's current leadership, potentially triggering a significant reorganization at the highest levels. The ground was shifting beneath Richard Carlton's feet. And somewhere in that shifting landscape, Eva sensed an opportunity not just for redemption, but for something she'd thought forever lost. A future point 3 days after the failed signing ceremony, Eva received a text from Julian just after midnight. Check your email. Urgent. She opened her laptop to find a message from him containing a single photo. Richard Carlton entering a private club downtown, accompanied by 2 men she recognized from the Halvik's executive team. Taken 30 minutes ago, Julian's message read, "He's meeting them secretly. Thought you should know." Eva stared at the image, understanding its implications immediately. Richard was desperate, trying to salvage something from the collapsed deal before his position became untenable. She forwarded the photo to Ms. Townsend with a simple message. "In case this is relevant to tomorrow's board meeting." Townsend's reply came within minutes, despite the late hour. "It is. Thank you." The next morning, Eva deliberately took a different route to Titan Tech, avoiding the reporters who had been camping outside her apartment building. When she arrived, the atmosphere in the building was electric with tension. Security personnel moved with heightened alertness. Executives huddled in whispered conversations that fell silent when others approached. Something significant was happening. Eva had just reached the maintenance level when her phone buzzed with a message from Townsend. "My office." Now, when she arrived, Townsend wasn't alone. Martin Williams, the general counsel, stood by the window, while Walter Bennett occupied one of the visitor chairs. "That photo you sent," Townsend began without preamble, "gave us what we needed." Richard was attempting to negotiate a private deal with Halvik's executives, a direct violation of the board's instruction to cease all contact pending investigation. Williams nodded grimly. "We have confirmation he offered to push through a modified version of the merger if Halvik's would support him against the board faction trying to remove him." Eva absorbed this information with a growing sense of vindication. So he was willing to sacrifice the company to save himself. "Precisely," Bennett said. "The board is voting at 9 o'clock. We already have the numbers, 6-3 to remove him as CEO." Eva checked the time, 8:40 a.m. "He doesn't know? He's been offered the chance to resign with a face-saving statement," Williams explained. "His other option is termination for cause, which would trigger clawbacks of his stock options and bonuses. He'll take the resignation," Eva said with certainty. "His ego couldn't handle public termination." Townsend's lips curved into a slight smile. "That's our assessment as well." Bennett cleared his throat. "Ms. Coleman, over the past few days, I've been reviewing your previous work at Marshall & Brooks. Your former supervisor there, before the partners turned against you, speaks very highly of your capabilities." Eva felt a flush of pride, quickly tempered by suspicion. "Why were you investigating me?" "Not investigating," Bennett corrected. "Evaluating. The board has authorized me to offer you a position." Eva stared at him, in disbelief. "A position?" "As an ethics consultant, initially," Townsend explained. "Working directly with our compliance and legal teams." We need someone who can see the cracks before we fall through them. The offer was so unexpected that Eva found herself momentarily speechless. 3 days ago, she'd been cleaning these people's offices. Now they wanted her professional opinion. Why me? She finally asked. You have Harvard MBAs and lawyers from top firms. I'm a disgraced legal assistant who never finished law school. Yes, Bennett agreed. And you spotted what all our expensive talent missed or chose to ignore. That's exactly the perspective we need. Eva thought about it. The offer was tempting, a chance to reclaim her professional identity, to use her skills again. But it also felt like a calculated move to keep her inside the tent, where she could be managed. I'd need certain assurances, she said carefully. Independence, access to information, protection from retaliation. Williams raised an eyebrow, impressed by her negotiating stance. All reasonable requests, Bennett agreed. We can draw up appropriate terms. Before Eva could respond further, Townsend's phone buzzed. She checked it and looked up with a satisfied expression. It's official. Richard has resigned, effective immediately. The board has approved an interim leadership committee until a permanent replacement is named. Less than an hour later, Richard Carlton stood before a forest of microphones in the Titan Tech lobby. His expression was tight, his usual confidence noticeably diminished. After careful consideration, I have decided to step down as CEO of Titan Tech, he announced, reading from prepared remarks. Recent events have highlighted the need for a new chapter in the company's leadership. I categorically deny any wrongdoing and reject the false narratives and deepfakes being circulated by our competitors. Eva watched the press conference on a monitor in Townsend's office, noting how Richard deflected blame to nebulous, false narratives rather than acknowledging his mistakes. Even in defeat, his ego wouldn't allow for humility, the market responded. Immediately, Titan Tech shares, which had been depressed since the merger collapse, jumped 7% on news of Richard's departure. Analysts praised the board's swift action as restoring confidence in corporate governance. By the end of the day, Eva had accepted the board's offer with several modifications she'd negotiated with Williams' help. Her new role would begin the following Monday, giving her time to adjust to the dramatic change in her circumstances. As she cleared out her locker in the maintenance department, Julian found her. Heard the news, he said with a broad smile. Ethics consultant. Impressive career change. Eva returned his smile. I'm not the only one moving up, from what I hear. Head of security operations. Julian ducked his head modestly. Just doing my job. Like hell, Eva laughed. You risked everything to help me. You deserve this promotion more than anyone. They walked together to the lobby, an unlikely pair united by their shared principles and the risks they'd taken. So what happens to Halvix now? Julian asked as they reached the exit. The SEC launched a formal investigation this morning, Eva replied. Grant Holloway has been placed on administrative leave pending the outcome. The merger is officially dead. And Richard? Eva shrugged. He'll land somewhere. Men like him always do. But his reputation is damaged. That matters in his world. Outside, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the plaza. Eva paused, looking up at the Titan Tech tower gleaming against the sky. For years, she'd entered through the service entrance, head down, invisible. On Monday, she would walk through the front doors as someone else entirely. Still feels unreal, she admitted. Get used to it, Julian advised. This is just the beginning. Over the weekend, Eva moved out of her tiny studio into a slightly larger apartment in a safer neighborhood, still modest, but no longer desperate. It was a practical choice. She could have afforded something nicer with her new salary, but years of financial precarity had taught her caution. On Sunday evening, as she unpacked her few belongings, her phone rang with an unknown number. Miss Coleman? This is Thomas Marshall from Marshall & Brooks. Eva nearly dropped the phone. Thomas had been her supervisor, the partner who had once praised her work before abandoning her when the senior partners turned against her. What do you want? She asked, not bothering to hide her coldness. To apologize, he said, his voice heavy with regret. We failed you, Eva. I failed you. When the managing partners decided to make an example of you, I should have stood up. I didn't, and I've regretted it ever since. Eva sat down slowly on her new sofa. Why call now? Because I'm in the news. Partly, he admitted, but also because you proved yourself right. Again, what you did at Titan Tech, It's what I always knew you were capable of. You saw what others missed, and you had the courage to speak up. I lost everything last time, Eva said quietly. I know, but you've turned it into something bigger than us. There was a pause. Several of our associates have mentioned you as an inspiration, you know. That's uncomfortable for the partners who pushed you out. Eva couldn't help but smile at that. Good. After they hung up, Eva stood at her window, looking out at the city lights. The call had given her something she hadn't realized she needed. Not vindication, exactly, but acknowledgement. The truth of what had happened to her at Marshall. And Brooks had finally been spoken aloud. Monday morning arrived bright and clear. Eva stood before her closet, considering her options. She'd spent her weekend shopping for appropriate business attire, something she hadn't needed in years. Her hand hovered over a gray suit, then moved to a navy blue one instead. New role, new color. The Titan Tech lobby fell momentarily quiet as she walked through the main entrance, security badge displayed on a lanyard around her neck rather than clipped to a maid's uniform. A few people did double takes, recognition dawning in their eyes. Eva kept her head high, making eye contact instead of avoiding it. As she waited for the executive elevator, not the service one this time, she caught her reflection in the polished doors. Navy blue suit, crisp white blouse, hair neatly styled. A folder tucked under her arm. The image of competence and purpose. The elevator doors opened, revealing Miss Townsend. Good morning, Eva, she said with a warm smile. Ready for your first day? Eva stepped inside, turning to face forward as the doors closed. More than ready, she replied. As the elevator rose swiftly toward the executive floors, Eva felt a sense of symmetry. 5 days ago, she had whispered 5 words that changed everything. That's the wrong contract, sir. Today, she wouldn't need to whisper. Her voice had found its proper volume, and people were finally ready to listen. The real power shift hadn't been in the boardroom or the press releases or even Richard's resignation. It had happened inside her, the quiet reclamation of her own worth. The elevator chimed as it reached the executive floor. The doors opened to reveal a world she had once only glimpsed while pushing a cleaning cart. Welcome to your new office, Townsend said. Eva stepped forward into the future she'd earned one careful observation at a time. 3 weeks into her new role at Titan Tech. Eva stood at the front of the main boardroom, a place where she had once only entered to dust surfaces and refill water glasses. Now, all eyes were on her as she delivered the final slide of her presentation. In conclusion, the internal oversight system I've proposed creates 3 layers of protection, she explained, her voice steady and confident. First, automated flagging of unusual contract modifications. Second, mandatory review of all material changes by independent legal teams. And third, direct reporting channels for employees at any level who spot potential issues. The boardroom was silent for a moment as her words settled. Eva had spent countless hours developing this system, drawing on her painful experiences at both Marshall and Brooks and Titan Tech to identify the blind spots where fraud could flourish. Walter Bennett was the first to speak. Implementation timeline. 6 weeks for the initial phase, Eva replied. 3 months for full integration across all departments. Cost? Asked another board member. Less than 1% of what the Halvix fraud would have cost us, Eva answered, without hesitation. The ROI analysis is on page 27 of your packets. The questions continued for another 20 minutes, substantive, detailed queries that Eva fielded with growing confidence. These people, who would have ignored her existence a month ago, were now leaning forward to hear her responses, taking notes, engaging with her ideas. As the meeting concluded, board members filed out, several stopping to compliment her presentation. Miss Townsend remained behind, a pleased expression on her face. Well done, she said simply. Eva gathered her materials, allowing herself a small smile. They asked good questions. That means they were actually listening. They're starting to understand what I already knew, Townsend replied. You see things others miss. As they walked together toward the executive offices, Eva became aware of glances from senior staff members, some curious, others openly resentful. Not everyone was pleased with her meteoric rise from cleaning staff to executive-leveled in the break room. She overheard Mark Wilson, a vice president of marketing, muttering to a colleague as she entered. The maid's taking notes now? What's next? The janitor running finance. Eva poured herself a cup of coffee, turned to face him directly, and said in a clear, calm voice, "No, I'm rewriting the rules. But I'm always happy to take feedback, Mark. My office hours are posted on the company directory." Wilson's face flushed. As he realized she'd heard him, his colleague stifled a smile, and they both quickly exited. Back in her new office, small but with an actual window, Eva found Julian waiting for her. "How'd it go?" he asked. "The board's on board," she replied with a slight smile at her own wordplay. "Now comes the hard part, changing the culture." Julian nodded. "Speaking of which, security footage from the Halvick's case has been officially entered into evidence with the SEC. They're moving fast on this one." "Good. Have you heard anything about Grant?" "Word is he's hired 3 separate law firms and is throwing everyone else under the bus." Julian shook his head in disgust, claiming he was misled by subordinates. Eva wasn't surprised. Men like Grant Holloway never accepted responsibility when things went wrong. Later that afternoon, Ms. Townsend asked Eva to join her for coffee in her office. The spacious corner suite offered a panoramic view of the city, a stark contrast to Eva's modest space. "I have a proposal for you," Townsend said once they were settled. "The board is creating a new division focused on corporate transparency and ethics. I'd like you to co-lead it with me." Eva's eyes widened. "That's a significant promotion. You've earned it." Townsend leaned forward. "Look, Eva, I've been at Titan Tech for 15 years. I've seen promising initiatives die because they weren't championed at the highest levels. This needs to be a structural change, not just a post-crisis reaction. You're serious about this?" "Deadly serious." Townsend's expression was earnest. "This is your second chance. Make it count." Eva thought about the opportunity before her. 6 weeks ago, she'd been invisible, scrubbing toilets and emptying trash bins. Now she was being offered the chance to transform the very culture that had once dismissed her. "When do we start?" she asked. Townsend smiled. "We already have." The next morning, Eva arrived early to find her email inbox flooded with notifications about a breaking news story. She clicked on the first link and found herself looking at Grant Holloway's grim face in a mugshot. The headline read, "Halvick's CEO arrested on fraud charges." According to the article, federal agents had arrested Grant at his home before dawn. The charges included securities fraud, wire fraud, and conspiracy related to the attempted Titan Tech takeover and similar schemes involving other companies. That Eva's phone rang. It was Julian. "You seeing this?" he asked without preamble. "Just reading it now," she replied. "I didn't expect it to happen so quickly." "That's not all," Julian continued. "He's naming Richard as a willing partner. Claims Richard knew about the altered contract clauses but looked the other way because of side benefits promised to him personally." Eva felt a cold certainty settle in her stomach. I wouldn't be surprised if that were true. Throughout the day, the story dominated business news. Titan Tech issued a brief statement expressing shock at the allegations against their former CEO and pledging full cooperation with investigators. The company's stock, which had been recovering steadily since Richard's departure, held firm despite the scandal, a sign that investors considered the corruption to be in the past. That evening, Eva received a surprising email from her old boss at Marshall & Brooks. "Eva, in light of recent events, our firm is conducting an internal review of your dismissal. It appears certain partners may have acted improperly in your case. Would you be willing to speak with our outside counsel? Regards, Thomas Marshall." She stared at the screen for a long moment. The validation felt surreal after years of being branded as incompetent and unreliable. But it also felt too little, too late. After careful consideration, she composed a reply. "Thomas, I appreciate the gesture, but I've moved forward with my career. My experience at Marshall & Brooks taught me valuable lessons about integrity and courage that I'm now applying elsewhere. I wish your firm well with its internal review. Regards, Eva Coleman." She hit send with a sense of closure. Some chapters weren't meant to be reopened. The following week brought another development. A deeper investigation into Richard Carlton's activities uncovered offshore accounts tied to him and records of secret meetings with Halvick's executives dating back months before the merger was publicly announced. Eva was in a strategy meeting with Miss Townsend when the news broke that Richard had been indicted for conspiracy and wire fraud. "Should we issue a statement?" someone asked. "The facts will speak for themselves," Townsend replied calmly. We focus on rebuilding, not rehashing. After the meeting, Eva found herself alone with Townsend in the elevator. You don't seem surprised. About Richard, Townsend observed. Eva met her gaze steadily. Are you? Townsend gave a small, rueful smile. No. I suspected for years that his moral compass was flexible. But suspecting and proving are different things. That's why systems matter more than individuals, Eva replied. Good people can make bad choices when the structure rewards the wrong behaviors. Townsend studied her with newfound respect. You should write that down. It belongs in our mission statement. Later that week, Eva took a personal day to visit her old law firm. She hadn't planned to go inside, just wanted to see the building that had once represented her future, then her downfall. But as she stood across the street, a young woman in a paralegal suit recognized her from news coverage. You're Eva Coleman, she said, eyes wide. Eva nodded, slightly uncomfortable with being recognized. I started here last year, the young woman continued. Everyone's talking about your case now. The partners are freaking out. She lowered her voice. You were right back then. We all know it now. The simple validation from a stranger touched Eva deeply. Thank you for saying that. That evening, there was a knock at Eva's apartment door. When she opened it, she found her sister Maya standing there, looking both nervous and determined. Surprise visit, Maya said awkwardly. Can I come in? Eva stepped aside, genuinely surprised. They hadn't seen each other in over a year, their relationship strained by Eva's career collapse and Maya's insistence that Eva should move on rather than seek justice. Maya looked around the new apartment, still modest, but considerably nicer than Eva's previous place. This is good. You're doing well. I am, Eva agreed, offering her sister a seat. What brings you by? Maya took a deep breath. I came to apologize. When you called me about the Titan Tech situation, I told you to keep your head down. I was wrong. She met Eva's eyes directly. I thought keeping your head down was the only way to survive. But you proved there's another way. The admission clearly cost Maya something in pride. Eva felt the wall between them start to crumble. It was a risk, Eva acknowledged. It could have gone very differently. But it didn't. Maya reached for her hand. You stood up and spoke the truth. Again. And this time, people listened. They talked late into the night, beginning the slow process of rebuilding their relationship. Before Maya left, she hugged Eva tightly. I'm proud of you, she whispered. Mom and Dad would be too. The following month brought another unexpected opportunity. Eva was invited to speak on a business ethics panel at her former university's law school. Standing at the podium, facing a room full of students and faculty, she felt a momentary flutter of nerves. 5 years ago, I was dismissed from a prestigious law firm for reporting fraud, she began. 3 months ago, I was working as a maid at Titan Tech headquarters. Today, I lead corporate ethics initiatives for the same company. The room was silent, everyone listening intently. I'm not sharing this as a rags to riches story, Eva continued. I'm sharing it because sometimes the janitor knows more than the executives. Sometimes the person emptying your trash bin understands your business better than your MBA consultants, because they're watching without being watched. She spoke without bitterness, but with clarity about the systems that silenced whistleblowers and the cultures that valued compliance over courage. By the end, the audience gave her a standing ovation. As summer turned to fall, Titan Tech implemented Eva and Townsend's transparency reforms across all departments. Initial resistance gave way to cautious acceptance, then active participation. As employees realized the new systems protected them as well, the board formally added Eva's ethics program into its core strategy, citing it as a competitive advantage in an industry plagued by scandal. What had begun as a crisis response was becoming a fundamental part of Titan Tech's identity. On a crisp October morning, Eva was summoned to a closed-door meeting with Walter Bennett and Robert Harrison. She entered the chairman's office uncertain what to expect. Eva, Bennett began warmly. Your work these past months has exceeded our highest expectations. Thank you, she replied cautiously. Harrison came straight to the point. We'd like to offer you the position of Vice President of Compliance Strategy. It would mean significant expansion of your current role with direct board reporting. Eva blinked in surprise. Vice President was executive leadership, a role usually reserved for people with decades of experience and prestigious credentials. This is unexpected, she said honestly. Bennett smiled. Perhaps, but well-deserved. You've proven yourself not just in catching fraud, but in building systems to prevent it. That's far more valuable. Harrison nodded in agreement. No more ceilings. Ms. Coleman, it's your floor now. As Eva left the chairman's office with the formal offer letter in hand, she passed the very boardroom where, just months ago, she had whispered the 5 words that changed everything. She paused for a moment, remembering the woman in the gray uniform who had found the courage to speak up. That woman had never imagined this outcome. But she had known, with absolute certainty, that silence wasn't an option. Sometimes truth was its own reward. And sometimes, if you were very lucky, it brought others with it. Spring sunshine spilled through the windows of Eva's new apartment as she arranged the last of her books on a built-in shelf. After nearly a year at Titan Tech in her new role, she had finally allowed herself to move somewhere that felt permanent. A bright one-bedroom with a small balcony overlooking a neighborhood park that IT wasn't extravagant by any measure. Eva remained cautious with money, the memory of financial precarity. Still fresh, but it was hers, filled with simple, quality pieces she had chosen with care. The walls were painted in soft blues and greens, creating a sense of calm that her previous cramped quarters had never provided. As she adjusted a framed photograph of her parents, the doorbell rang. Julian stood outside, holding a small gift bag. Housewarming, he explained with a grin. I'm not late, am I? Eva laughed and welcomed him in. Not at all. I'm just finishing up. Julian whistled appreciatively as he looked around. Nice place. Great light. It's more space than I need, Eva admitted. But after years of being able to touch both walls of my apartment at the same time, you deserve this, Julian said firmly, handing her the gift bag. Every bit of it. Inside was a simple black frame. Eva removed the tissue paper to find a copy of the original contract clause she had spotted, the one that had first alerted her to the fraud. Julian had mounted it behind glass with a small engraved plaque that read, "Proof that silence isn't always safe." Julian. She was touched by the thoughtfulness of the gift. Just a reminder, he said with a shrug, of where it all started. They shared coffee on her new balcony, catching up on work developments. Julian had thrived in his role as head of security operations, implementing protocols that balanced security with respect for employees. Heard the news about Richard? He asked. Eva nodded. Richard Carlton's trial had concluded the previous week. 12 years. No possibility of parole until at least 8 are served. Justice, Julian said simply. Of a sort, Eva agreed, neither felt the need to gloat. Richard's fall had been spectacular enough without their commentary, from CEO of a billion-dollar company to prisoner in a federal facility. His arrogance had cost him everything. That evening, Eva watched a news interview with Grant Holloway, who had finally broken his silence after accepting a plea deal. The formerly smooth executive looked haggard and defensive as he pointed fingers at everyone but himself. I was misled by my team, he insisted to the skeptical interviewer. The irregularities in the contract were never brought to my attention. The interviewer was having none of it. Yet emails recovered from your account specifically discussed the bait and switch strategy. How do you explain that? Grant's composure cracked. Those emails were taken out of context. This whole situation has been blown out of proportion by media sensationalism. The interview cut to commercial after Grant snapped at the reporter. Eva muted the television, feeling neither vindication nor pity. Grant had made his choices. Now, he was living with the consequences. Social media, however, was less restrained. The interview went viral, with one comment gaining particular traction. You got played by a maid. Eva winced at the framing but understood the sentiment. To men like Grant, her former position had made her invisible, beneath notice, and that had been their critical mistake. The following week, Eva noticed her bylined article on corporate ethics was gaining traction online. She had been publishing pieces anonymously for months under a pseudonym, but this was her first under her own name. An analysis of how companies could create safer channels for employees to report concerns. All it took was a whisper from someone. Nobody noticed, she had written in the conclusion. That line was being quoted across business publications and ethics forums. Her phone rang as she was reviewing the analytics. It was Ms. Townsend. Have you seen the invitation? Townsend asked without preamble. What invitation? Check your email. The board wants you to be the keynote speaker at this year's annual gala. Eva quickly found the message. The Titan Tech Annual Gala was the company's most prestigious event, bringing together executives, board members, major clients, and industry leaders. The keynote speech was traditionally given by the CEO or a distinguished outside speaker. This is unexpected, Eva said, echoing her response from months earlier when offered the VP position. Townsend laughed. You need a new reaction to good news, Eva. This is a recognition of your impact on the company's transformation. Accept it. After they hung up, Eva sat at her small desk, thinking about the invitation. 1 year ago, she would have been serving champagne at this event, not making the keynote address. The contrast was almost too sharp to comprehend. She opened her laptop and began drafting ideas for her speech. If she was going to address Titan Tech as leadership, she wanted her message to be both memorable and meaningful. The night of the gala arrived with perfect early summer weather. The event was held at the National Art Museum, its grand halls transformed with elegant lighting and floral arrangements. Eva arrived early, wearing a simple but beautifully cut midnight blue gown, a significant upgrade from her previous formal wear, but still understated compared to many of the designer outfits she saw around her. Dais, she sipped sparkling water near a Greek sculpture. Eva observed the crowd with the same careful attention she had once used while cleaning their offices. Old habits died hard. She still noticed details others missed, who spoke with whom, which executives avoided each other, whose smiles didn't reach their eyes. When it was time for her speech, Eva approached the podium with measured steps. The ballroom fell silent as she surveyed the assembled Titan Tech community, from board members to department heads to rising stars in every division. 1 year ago, she began, I stood in a different Titan Tech room, wearing a gray uniform, holding a duster, and noticed something that didn't add up. I had a choice, stay silent or speak up. The room was absolutely still, hundreds of faces turned toward her. I chose to speak, not because I was brave, but because silence felt impossible. What I didn't expect was that anyone would listen. She continued, weaving together the personal and the professional, the individual and the institutional. She spoke about the systems Titan Tech had built over the past year, not to congratulate herself, but to challenge the company to keep building them, to keep listening to voices from unexpected places. She concluded to resounding applause. Eva raised her glass. To seeing what's right in front of us, especially when it's trying to tell us something important. After the speech, Eva found herself surrounded by well-wishers and conversation partners. Among them was a young black woman who introduced herself as Zoe, a recently hired intern in the legal department. Your speech was amazing, Zoe said, her eyes bright with admiration. When I read about your story last year, it made me feel like I could belong in corporate spaces too. Like maybe my voice could matter someday. Eva smiled warmly. It already matters. Then you already do. Later that evening, as the gala wound down, Eva slipped away from the crowds for a moment of quiet. She found herself in a small gallery where the museum had displayed some of its contemporary collection. She studied a painting. Walter Bennett appeared beside her. Remarkable speech, he said. You had them in the palm of your hand. Thank you, Eva replied, though I suspect some were just being polite. Bennett chuckled. You still underestimate your impact, Eva. The company's ethics rating has improved 40% since you came on board. Our recruitment numbers for women and minorities are up. And after your whistleblower protection program was featured in the Wall Street Journal, 3 of our competitors have adopted similar models. Eva absorbed this information with quiet pride. It's a start. More than that, Bennett insisted. It's a transformation. The following morning, Eva found an unexpected letter in her mailbox, handwritten on expensive stationery. The return address showed it came from James Wilson, the managing partner who had fired her from Marshall & Brooks. With slight trepidation, she opened it. Dear Ms. Coleman, I've followed your remarkable career trajectory with great interest. Your recent address at the Titan Tech Gala, which I attended as a guest, prompted me to finally write this long overdue letter that we failed you. I failed you. When you brought legitimate concerns to our attention years ago, we chose expedience over ethics, protection of power over pursuit of truth. You turned it into something bigger than us, and in doing so, have changed how many firms approach whistleblower complaints. This isn't an attempt to reconcile or repair the damage done. Some breaches can't be mended. But I wanted you to know that your courage has had ripple effects far beyond what you might imagine. Respectfully, James Wilson. Eva refolded the letter slowly. She had no desire to forgive Wilson or reconnect with her old firm. But there was something validating about this acknowledgement, this admission that she had been right all along. She placed the letter in a drawer rather than framing it like Julian's gift. Some chapters were worth remembering but not celebrating. That afternoon, Eva had a meeting at Titan Tech headquarters to discuss the next phase of their ethics implementation. As she walked through the executive floor toward the conference room, she passed the same boardroom where it had all begun. She paused for a moment, looking through the glass walls at the empty table where, 1 year ago, she had whispered 5 words that changed the course of her life and the fate of a billion-dollar company. That's the wrong contract, sir. So simple, so consequential. Eva didn't need to say those words again. She didn't need to whisper anymore. Now, she was the one holding the pen, crafting new policies, signing off on initiatives, creating systems where truth could surface without requiring extraordinary courage from ordinary people. She continued down the hallway, her heels clicking confidently on the polished floor, no longer invisible, no longer overlooked, but carrying with her the memory of the woman in gray who had seen what others had missed. Sometimes the most powerful changes began with the smallest sounds, a whisper in a quiet room, speaking truth to power. And sometimes, if the moment was right and the courage was there, that whisper could echo far beyond its origin, transforming silence into something new entirely. For Eva Coleman, that transformation was complete. The whisper had become a voice, and the voice had become a chorus, changing not just her life, but countless others. And that was a story worth telling, again and again. Who among us hasn't been overlooked, underestimated, or dismissed, and what truths might we be brave enough to whisper if given the chance? If Eva's journey from invisible to influential moved you, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories that remind us the most powerful voices often come from unexpected places.